Porter's already, I apologise. Just move on to the next slide. So just a little bit about us before we start. So Clover HR, we have been around for a number of years now. We have been providing bespoke HR services for our clients. We are involved in anything to do with HR, including training, recruitment, and general consultant work on day-to-day HR advice. So if you wish to speak to me at all about Clover and how we can help you, please feel free to contact myself or any one of our team after the webinar. And we quickly want to just sing our praises briefly. We've recently got accredited with the ISO 9001. So this shows that we are progressing ourselves as a business, looking at how we can deliver the best service to our clients. So we're currently very proud of this certification, and I'm sure if you follow us on LinkedIn, you'll see a lot of information on this. So briefly, I'll introduce myself. I'm Sarah Hudson. I'm an Associate Director and a HR Business Partner with Clover HR. I have over 10 years experience in HR. I come from a legal background, and I'll be presenting on today the information about managing people. I also have a colleague with me. You can't see her, but she is here. Her name is Lynn Burnham, and she is also Associate Director and HR Business Partner. We're going to be asking some questions during the webinar. And so Lynn will be in charge of the chat box. If you've got any questions outside of the questions we're asking, please do feel free to pop them into the chat box, and we'll be able to answer those for you. As I've just said, any questions you have, please feel free to ask. If it's a long answer, then we'll contact you outside of the webinar. And just for anyone who has got their microphone on, if we could put that on mute, that would be wonderful. So the contents of what we're going to look at today. So firstly, we're going to have a brief look at the actual role of the line manager. So what are your responsibilities towards your people? And following into this, the day-to-day basics of the line managing. Then we're going to focus a little bit more on leadership behaviours and have a think about whether these are behaviours that you're exhibiting at the moment in your role. And then go on to look at communication and how we can be constructive in that communication. So the first thing I'm going to do is ask a question. And that question is, what do you see as the most important role of a line manager when managing people? So I'm going to go through some of these points that we believe are important, but I'd really like to get some feedback. And if you could pop it onto the chat box, that would be really brilliant. Just about what you think is really important from the experiences you've had, or you know, working with other people, what experiences they've had, just so we can kind of get a bit of an idea of what people are feeling towards that. And we'll have a look at the answer to these questions, and there'll be a couple more questions. We'll have a look at the answers to those at the end of the session. So what we want to look at here is the responsibilities of a line manager towards the people who report to them. So first of all, here we've got to lead to achieve. And this is to lead and manage your team to achieve the departmental objectives and personal success. So this is both success for you as a manager and also for your team members. And it's remembering that these two successes are really dependent on each other, which is why they're important for both parties. Secondly, we're looking at to develop. So this is understanding ways to develop your team members so that they can reach their targets and their goals. And as part of this, you need to ensure that you have the right people for the right job. If they don't have the right skill set, that can be resolved through training, development, and communication with that person to understand what they're comfortable with and what perhaps they want a bit more help with. And this isn't just thinking about short-term tasks, but looking at the future makeup of your team as well. When we talk about training, we acknowledge this might involve some investment So it really is key to understand what you're trying to achieve from this. What development does that person need? And what for the business are you trying to get from it? Then you can assess your training to make sure that it is effective and cost effective for the business. We move on to communication. And this is something very big and important and something that we're going to come back to later on in the webinar. Firstly, when I'm talking about communication, I'm talking about the way in which you communicate yourself. So this is all about remaining professional, and that is vital. Always be respectful. Regardless of how the other person is behaving, you want to always maintain that relationship of respect and professionalism. Secondly, I'm talking about what we communicate. So communication's always quite a big area for managers, and it is something that takes quite a bit of learning. It involves finding that balance between what people need to know and the time that you have to explain something to them, and ultimately that they need to continue with their job, potentially without all the information. Initially, you need to give direction. So what we're looking at with communication is how you can enhance that and add to this direction that you've given to provide more understanding. Then we come to being fair and consistent. So we're talking here about making sure that everybody is treated equally. There aren't any favourites. People don't feel that some people are more able to communicate with you as a line manager than other people within the team. Not only is it a legal requirement to ensure equality within your team, but it also builds that respect and that relationship within your team members so that everybody knows their role within the team. To recognise success. And this is important, and it is as simple as a thank you and a well done. And it's having that kind of two-way communication where there is that recognition that someone has done a job well done and that will be acknowledged. And that really helps with the engagement of the team to ensure that that's being done consistently. To support well-being. So this is to ensure that employees are on track, that they are comfortable, and that it's not necessarily to say you need to know every detail of their lives, but that you understand what's going on in the background and how that might impact on their work environment as well. So I'm not talking here about knowing the ins and outs of everything that's going on. It's more around being there and approachable for somebody to come and ask for help if they need it, and to explain any situations that they might have outside of the workplace. And then finally, we have to resolve employee issues. And here we're probably talking about the day-to-day work as a manager with employees that people think about all the time. So looking at processes. So if there's somebody who's underperforming, looking at performance management. If there are behavioural issues, looking at potential disciplinary action that we need to follow, dealing with any investigations into any grievances. So the issues that come with a group of people working together that need to be resolved. And by this, we're looking at following processes correctly to make sure that that's done, and going back again to looking at being fair and consistent in dealing with people through those processes. So now I'm going to come on to the day-to-day basics of being a manager. And these are things that you probably all know and you're probably doing day to day, but I think it's always worth going back to basics and just having a talk through the things that really are important for a manager to consider in what they're doing with their people. So firstly, we're looking at workloads. So are people in the right roles? Have they got enough work? Have they got too much work? Are you taking the time to check capacity with people? Are you communicating with them to understand what it is that they are doing and whether that's taking an appropriate amount of time? Secondly, training, and a lot of these points that we're making are going to be repetitive because they are so important. So again, we come to training. Make sure that the individuals have access to training, and that they're getting the correct training that they need. So they are doing something that's relevant to their role and that it's filling a skill gap that they might have. And it's not setting them up to fail. It's making sure that they have the opportunity to learn something before they have to go into a role where they are doing that thing. Personnel files, a boring task, but making sure that things are up to date, making sure that GDPR guidelines are being followed with personnel files, that everything is safe and secure. And that you're following your processes in terms of what documentation you should have for each person. And then finally, an open door policy. And by this, it's very cliche, but it works. It's making sure that people know that they can come and speak to you, that you're there to help them if they have any issues, and that you will be able to do that and take that forward in a confidential and professional manner. So I'm coming on now to leadership behaviours. And I'm going to talk through some of these things to consider and whether you're displaying these leadership behaviours. Firstly, effective decision making. Are you making those calls that need to be made? Are you being clear about the decisions that you're making? Secondly, communication. Are you communicating? How do you feel your communication is? Are you communicating with everybody? And how open is your communication? Encourage innovation. So, can your people think outside the box and come to you with ideas? Do you encourage that kind of relationship where that can happen? And then coaching and developing others. Do you consider how to develop others? Are you limiting this to a conversation during an annual review? Or are you talking about this ongoing so that people can consider next steps in their development? So I'm going to ask a question here, and I'm going to send a poll for you all to gauge some of these answers. And the question I have is, do you feel that you are consistent in displaying leadership behaviours? So I'll leave that poll, let you have a little think about that and look at your response. Now we come on to the big topic in terms of management, and that's communication. And here I'm going to ask another question. Have you ever failed to communicate effectively? And if so, what were the results of that? And it'd be really interesting to get some real life examples from you of where you've come across that and you've had to learn from that experience. And it's always helpful to share these experiences so that other people can kind of learn from that as well. So in terms of communication, what I want to talk about first of all, and I think this is key, is understanding the importance of communication. So why is it important? And the points here that I'm going to discuss link back to the role of line manager. So it's worth taking into consideration while talking about this, the role that you're doing. So communication is critical to employee engagement, and it in turn promotes better performance, employee retention and well-being. So I've got a quote from the CIPD, and it states that employees are more likely to engage and contribute when there is an open culture. Good employee engagement enables employees to stay connected to their workplace, understand the organisation's purpose and strategy, identify with its values, and develop a sense of belonging by understanding how they contribute to that wider purpose. So from looking at that, I'm now going to look at barriers to communication. And I've got a couple of barriers here that revolve around leadership. And firstly, we have there not being a clear definition from the managers on the direction of the organisation and the impact that this has on employees. It's reliant on the senior leadership to filter this down, but managers really have an important part to play as well to ensure that that filtering down carries on to their employees. It shouldn't remain at top level an understanding of what the purpose of the organisation is and what they're trying to do. And secondly, another barrier is a manager's lack of skill and confidence and the time needed as well to communicate with their team. So the CIPD Good Working Index survey found that 1/3 of employees reported reported that their managers were poor at helping inform them of management decisions. So they're feeling that they don't know what's going on in the business. They're not getting the information that they need. And that's quite a large figure, 1/3 of employees to be saying that they're not getting the appropriate communication. So now we've looked at the importance of communication. I want to consider some points for improving communication. So firstly, looking at setting the tone. So is your approach friendly? Is it professional? Do you have the right balance between those? Are you focused when you're dealing with employees? So for example, when you're holding meetings with people, are you having that one-to-one meeting with them in an office set up for a confidential meeting rather than just a conversation at their desk? Are you making it a priority? So are you explaining that you're not expecting to be disturbed during this meeting and they have your full undivided attention for that time? And also discouraging gossip or taking sides in any issues that might arise. It's making sure that not only are you not doing it, but you're making sure that other people within the team aren't doing this as well. Then we come to being accountable. So this is being accountable for the actions that you've said you'll do, and also following up on anything you've committed to do. We come on to getting feedback. And this is looking at top-down and bottom-up communication to understand all viewpoints. Asking something simple like, do you have any questions? Or does everyone understand what I've just told you? Is a good opportunity to get some feedback from people. Also reflect on the different styles of how people like information and maybe ask questions around that. So do they prefer things in written form, verbally, or both? And next, encourage discussions. So engage and communicate informally with people. Reflect back on the tone. Are you open to discussion? Have you encouraged it? Is it part of the culture in your team? And then finally, we have giving feedback, possibly one of the more difficult aspects of communication. So I'm going to just move on to the next slide where we can take a look at how to give effective feedback. So it can be difficult to give feedback and maintain a dialogue, and it's helpful to have some guidance. So we have here a CBI model tool for giving feedback, and this is particularly around behaviour. So you'll see from this that you're looking at describing the situation that had occurred with the individual, so what they did, the behaviour that you saw, so this is more what they did, sorry, so what you witnessed, and then the impact of the behaviour. So why was it not acceptable if that is the case? So going through this model each time gives you some guidance on how to think constructively about giving feedback and making sure that the person you're providing that feedback to understands that this is constructive and it's to help them learn from that. Examples and reliving the moment can be really powerful to employees in giving feedback. So you're taking them back to that situation and making sure that they understand it all the way through. And now we come to dealing with problems. So this is around where you have given constructive feedback, but you're still not getting the response that you're looking for. So we have, first of all, following your own processes. And this is really important. You need to always make sure that you're using the tools available to you. So, for example, you're looking at your grievance policy, your disciplinary policy, your performance management strategy, your absence management strategy. Are you doing everything that you say within these documents that you will do? Because to be fair to people, you need to ensure that they're aware of the process and that you are all following exactly what you should be doing. That way, there are no surprises and everyone understands what's expected of them. Secondly, asking for help. And there is nothing wrong with asking for help, as I'm sure everybody's aware. Now, this might be a case of speaking to a colleague who might be able to support you, who may have done something previously in the same kind of situation. This could be receiving training, so ensuring that you are fully developed to and equipped with the tools to be able to respond to situations, particularly training on your processes as well, so that you understand what you should be doing. And also, I'm going to include in here speaking to a HR consultant, so coming to Clover and asking for help in whatever aspect it is that you're looking at. So whether this be from having difficult conversations with employees, any kind of mediation, to just ensuring that the policies are in the right place and they are correct and you are able to follow them clearly. And finally, and again, really important, making sure that you're fair and consistent in how you deal with people always. And it's always going to come back to this, making sure that you're objective, you're being fair, and that way people will always feel that they have, even if they don't get the result that they want, they have been listened to fairly. So I'm just going to summarise really briefly, and then I'm going to hand over to Lynn to have a look at the discussion that we've had in the chat. Hopefully there's been some good responses there and to some of the questions we've asked. But in summary, looking at the role of the manager, it's to ensure that you're encouraging and supporting and you're equipped to do this, that you know your people, that you can be a good leader, you've thought about the leadership behaviours, it's on your radar, something that you're looking at. As we've gone over, communication is key. It's a big topic. We've touched on it briefly here, but it is a real skill and something that does take work to make sure that it is effective. And then when communication fails, or if there is a problem outside of that within the team, being constructive in dealing with it, using the tools to make sure that we can deal with those problems effectively. So I'm going to just take a look at the results that we have. So the question that I asked in our poll was, do you feel that you're consistent in displaying leadership behaviours? And we have quite interesting results. So we've got 82% say yes, feel that they are consistent, and then we've got 18% who say no. So it might be that some of you feel that you need to consider it a little bit more, and hopefully this webinar has been useful for you in looking at how you can think about those leadership behaviours. It is difficult to consistently be doing that, so it is something that people do need to consider ongoing, and it is a process that you should be thinking about every day. Are you doing it correctly? And have a bit of self-reflection into what you are doing. So that was very useful, some information there, so that's good. Lynn, I'm going to hand over to you, if that's all right, to have a look at what results we've got from the chat.
Yes, thanks, Sarah. Hi, everyone. So the first question was, what do you see as the most important role of a line manager? Now, here, we've definitely got being a good listener. I think if you know what's going on and know your people well, this is something that can only help you in long term. And I feel, certainly in our experience as a HR professional, we all have that manager that we remember in any walk of life because of how they made you feel. remember what that was like and what traits they had and how it made you feel from that relationship. And if the relationship is good between you and your employees as their line manager, this should in turn help obviously the work and productivity in itself. So just to endorse that message now, to think about your best line manager and what they did for you. Your second question was, have you ever failed to communicate effectively, and what were the results of this? So we've had a situation where an employee was worried because the line manager didn't explain the task properly. A colleague fortunately told them about this, so it ended up explaining it again, but it made the line manager realise that they needed to be clearer in their communication. So by not explaining it, in this sense, it was a happy outcome. However, it can cause confusion, frustration, or even anger if you don't communicate properly. So it is best to think about what you're communicating, how you're communicating, and who to. So that's the answer to the question, Sarah. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lynn. So that is it for our webinar today. Thank you for attending. I hope you found it useful. If you have any questions, please do feel free to get in contact with us at Clover, and hopefully we'll see you again on our next webinar. Thank you very much, everybody.